What we will have now is a panel that we will now invite all of our panelists. Yes, Sunil, you need to have a long way down. And immediately after, we will have our lunch break, 1 hour lunch break. And we hope to see all of you here back after lunch. So I would like to invite our panelists to sit around this nice table. And then when you are here, I will start introducing each one of you. So Sunil, Dr. Dorit, Eran, Professor Averbuch, each one of you, please take your seat. And Professor Intrator, excellent. Sunil, yes, I can change the label for you. Eli, also, come and sit. Yes. Sunil, yes. We need to change, otherwise. Okay, excellent. So, we have now the panel. People which stand in the back, there is some empty seats and also some places here on the sides, because this is going to be a very interesting panel, so I would like to see you sitting and taking the time. Yes, some of them already know each other from last year, and I want to see some fight here. I will let each one of you to introduce himself shortly, and then we will start with the question. So I will start first with, of course, Dorit. She is representing here Checkpoint. So let's start with Dorit, and then we move.
Dorit Dor, it's 20 years, 23 if you count really, in Checkpoint, managing R&D products, and have a PhD from Tel Aviv University. Checkpoint is all about cybersecurity. In the past few years, we adopted seriously AI as part of advanced threat prevention. That's it.
Sunil Kurkure, working. Intel Capital, been an investor for about a dozen plus years. I lead our cybersecurity and software infrastructures based in the US.
Eden Shochat, built a few companies, last of which Eternity, that Intel Capital supported, sold to Riverbed. Face.com sold to Facebook. Junction as a startup accelerator 10 years ago. Now moved over to the dark side, so venture capital, Aleph, 350 million under management. Invested into WeWork, Lemonade, a few others.
Amir, Averbuch, I'm Professor of Computer Science, Tel Aviv University, and also founder of TETARray. It's a big data analytic company that's doing anomaly detection in data for cyber, industrial, and financial, and we concentrate on financial.
I am Nathan Intrator, also a professor in computer science and neuroscience, mathematician in background, actually interested in the brain, and thinks that everything is mathematics around the brain, doing machine learning for many years, but really trying to push that to read the brain better and to actually optimize the brain. Started recently a company called Neuroscience to actually reading the brain in a very simple way.
Hi, good morning. Amar Sif, Chief Defense Technologies Officer at the National CERT, part of the NCD, National Cyber Directorate. Prior to that, 7 years at NISA, and the head of the proactive unit.
Okay, so thank you very much for this nice introduction of each one of you. And now we will start with the questions. At the beginning it will be an easy one. Later we will move to the tough one. So we will start something which is related to investment and VCs in the AI domain. So the question is, do you think that VCs has the responsibility to distinguish between good, and I'm saying this in quotes, good startup companies in AI and bad startup companies in AI? And are they influencing also the direction that those startup companies are going forward in the right investment of this direction. So if you would like Sunil or Eden to start, and then the rest, of course.
Sure. So AI has been around for a long time, and many of the folks here that spoke before us talked about it. And from investment perspective, since 2011, AI has been very prominent in the security startup era with endpoint protection companies, next generation at the time, using AI. We moved over to CASBs after that in 2013 with companies like SkyHigh and Netscope, et cetera. And then we're now into orchestration companies such as Demisto and Phantom Cyber, which Spunkbot last month. When we look at AI, we look at it from one of the professors spoke about. In security, the biggest challenge is frankly lack of security researchers in the world. And the only way to deal with this is to be able to automate a lot of the incident responses or alerts that are coming out related to malware. How do you do that? You have to have proper algorithms. You got to have experts who develop techniques that can help security researchers, and there are companies who are doing that today, and we're looking at that. In terms of, Jacob, good versus bad, I don't know how we, from an investment perspective, how we determine that, except the fact that we're looking, does it add value to the customers, right, when we look at investments? And so from that perspective, I would consider we're looking at good AI. However, for every good company, there's always bad actors out there who's going to try and break that up. Companies like Uber disrupted the automotive industry. In AI is no different. There are companies who are doing good, and there are people also trying to dismantle that. So it is a challenge. One of the things that we've been looking at Intel Capital recently is really about securing AI, more so than AI for security. There's been a lot of play around AI for security, but it's really the securing the AI is going to be the critical thing going forward.
There are the same good and bad exist in cyber as a whole. There is a whole business of attackers in cyber. Take a company in the news like NSO, sells tools for attacking, and then you start dispute if they sell it to the right people or that they sell it to the wrong people. So I don't think that this question is new to AI, and I don't think that there is anything new to AI. I personally prefer to be on the defense side and not to be even borderline, doing bad stuff. But it doesn't mean that there isn't business on the other side. So there is goodness in controlling cyber warfare, creating strong tools. But as a country, Israel is also, at least based on public information, using cyber to attack others. And so this is an industry. If we are not going to stop this industry, then VCs has the right to invest in this industry. And if somebody wants to stop, governments from using it and then buying tools from others, then this is a bit naive, I think. So unless we stop, all the offensive side, which will obviously solve some of the defense side too, we are also going to invest in the offensive of AI, I think.
I think Dorit is making a very good point about NSO, which basically it's unrelated to AI in the sense that there are even just people here from 8200 would decide not to go to NSO because they feel it's a bad thing. But if I go to the meta side, like how you run a venture capital firm, the European Union tried to force VCs to have an article about what will the VCs that the EU support, what will they invest in, right? And many VCs objected to that, saying, hey, our job is to create value to our LPs, so you cannot force us into not investing or forcing us to invest in certain things. And the majority of VCs around the world have decided not to take in those type of clauses. So that's in the meta level as to how you run a VC. Specifically, but a VC, I look at about 500 companies a year. We will invest in about 0.5%. So in many ways, it's a quality of life. Do you believe that you want to invest into an attack company? Do you want to invest into a company using AI, for example, for algo trading? Right? Algo trading, algorithm-based trading, is in many ways stealing money away from the common folks that trade on an ongoing basis because they provide liquidity, but they also step ahead of people. So is that bad? Is that good? I think it's a personal decision in the 0.5%, right? Do I want to wake up every morning and feel as if I've supported a good thing or a bad thing in my own value system while I generate return to our LPs, to our limited partners, the ones that gave us money?
Okay, one thing that I don't want to be is a VC. There is, in Israel, I don't know, every year there is 600 companies in cyber, and everyone who's leaving 8 to 100 is stealing a feature and build a company. So to see something very substantial coming out of it is very difficult.
I'll kind of continue that point actually and say that AI has become a commodity a little bit too early, and cyber kind of has become a commodity also a little bit too early. And some people take off the shelf a little bit of AI and a little bit of cyber and come up with an idea that may not be relevant maybe a few months later, and they try to start a company. And I really don't want to be in the position of the VCs, which see a lot of such companies and really have to try and figure out who is actually going to be relevant in 2 years and who is actually not going to be relevant at all. So the task is very big in that respect. I believe that those who have a better chance to succeed are those who really are serious investigators in AI and serious investigators into cybersecurity, for example, the lecture we just heard. And of course, these guys will be able to maneuver and change and find the right solution and the right problem to work on, whereas those people who just got out of 8200 and did something there and are thinking that, wow, they can take it very far, I'm afraid that a lot of them will realize quickly that they went too far too quickly.
Thank you. Well, I have a different perspective. I'm not consider that to be good or bad. I have the major challenge that I'm seeing is the bias problem. So we know that emerging, it doesn't matter if it's threats or it's emerging challenges. We're working on the data, we're working on the training data to understand how we could foresee it, how could understand that. Regarding your questions, I think that the answer is we could provide great numbers. We could provide a very, very good statistics model. But it's not sufficient if we're not connecting that to the challenge that we're working on. So we need to make sure that the data regarding cyber, because it is a world of questions and not answers. It's not a world of solutions. It's a world of asymmetric world or questions about it. We need to make sure that the training data is good enough, is strong enough, is sufficient to answer the emerging threat that we are trying to work on, and that is the major problem if we are going to even push forward companies to do that. By the way, this is exactly what we are trying to do as a national institution. We're trying to provide the metadata to the organization to make sure that they understand what they are facing and getting a better results or an accurate results so they may answer the question.
Thank you very much until this point, and you mentioned CERT and national activities. So let's take this forward and ask you another question to the panelists. Here in Israel now we established CERT. Everybody knows that. If not, then now you know. At least yesterday it was very nice that one with the CERT representative put their number, big number on the screen and say, please write down this number. If you have an incident, a cyber incident, you know to whom to call, which normally they should help you. But how you think the cooperation between national CERTs here in Israel and all around the world should cooperate with the industry and the academia to take advantage of what we saw exactly today, all this marvelous research in this AI domain, like we saw today. So how do you think this should go forward?
Start. So this is a very good point, Jacob. So sharing of threat intel or data, there's only one industry that does it well. It's really the financial services industry in the US. So if one of them gets hacked, they'll share the data with their peers. No other industry does this. This is one of the biggest problems CISOs have. They actually don't know how can they prepare themselves to deal with this. And an organization like CERT in Israel, working with global governments or corporations, the challenge is, frankly, people are afraid to share, in the sense that there's consequences to tell the world that you've been breached. So there has to be a mechanism to do this. The financial services do it. They're collaborating closely in their industry, but other industries don't do it, and we've got to figure out a way. What's the best way to do that?
I'll make 2 points. One is there are industry alliances. We are part of the founding members of Cyber Threat Alliance, where Checkpoint, Cisco, Palo Alto, and multiple other companies, but these are some of companies that compete between them, that we all share threats between us. And we also collaborate in an event. So when there is a worldwide attack, these teams come together and share what we know and see how to defend. There are other communities. We are part of the Europol kind of team that does the same. So there are things like this in the industry. I think this point number 2 is that I think the question is, what do you share? And the main value is if you share the deep things, not the shallow things. So the problem is if you only share like the end fact of an attack, but you didn't share the attack method. If you only shared some of the details, but you didn't share all the data. And the problem is that sharing all the context and sharing the whole flow of the attack, etc., is complicated. So it's not like there is a simple way to do it. At the end, it's the easiest thing to just say, I was attacked with this end result, but it doesn't give enough content to analyze. So one of the things we're trying to do, going back to the first point in the Cyber Threat Alliance, is to give more context. And you actually get more point on the sharing if you gave more context to it. But it's cost you money to give more context. So sometimes you have the context and sometimes not, and it's hard to ask customers to have the context. I don't think it's much about AI, but I don't think it's also as easy as it sounds, and just, people are just not doing it. It's a bit more complicated.
I'll take this as a broader question because I thought you were asking about IP and about presentations also. So I'm actually on the board of Ramot. Ramot is the commercialization entity of Tel Aviv University, where we sit. And the big issue is that people don't actually even understand what people in the academia do research. And people think that just by publishing the patents and hoping that you now start a new company in the area of cyber or something else, that the university will actually be able to commercialize it. And the same applies to Technia, and the same applies to basically every university in Israel. So if you want to actually see research applied to real-world problems and kind of bridge the gap, I think the key thing is actually creating a contextual library that says, hey, this is the meaning of this research, and this is areas where it can be applied. And I think Israel as a whole has been pretty bad at that, and results actually show how much licensing is happening. So IP commercialization, I think, is one. So applying to the problem. And then I think there's a government responsibility beyond cyber just to externalize the information that we have as a government. In AI, basically, you're as good as your data. And data is actually really hard to come by. So I think it's a cyber or otherwise, it's the government responsibility to externalize the data sets that it has accumulated over the years.
Thank you very much. Anyone from the panelists?
Just about the CERT itself.
Okay.
So, I don't know if everybody knows, but we are part of Carnegie Mellon FIRST institution. FIRST is actually 168 168 CERTs worldwide. 58 of them are national CERTs. And the most important thing is we are not sharing only indicator of compromise or indicator of attribution, the context and the actionable information. We're actually sharing researches, meaning what metadata we could provide, what metadata Data 61 from Australia are sharing it with us, so we will be able to understand the next challenge. Just a quick example, recent research that is going to be published within a few, I hope, days or weeks, It's regarding the latest ransomware attacks. What is the common ground for the latest 7 ransomware attacks? What we could understand from that, and how we could provide better data so the research centers. Checkpoint is a great example that assists us during WannaCry. Cisco, of course, many other companies provide us all the knowledge they have. We just combine all that knowledge and sharing that with researchers, with startup companies, with other countries to understand how to deal with the next challenge, what is the best approach, what is the data that needed for the other startup companies to engage that research they are doing.
You want to say?
I'll just put another viewpoint of the academia. So sharing data from the point of view of national need is, of course, the best thing that can happen. NSF started that a while ago with sharing medical information with huge databases of genetic data, etc. And that pushed the science quite a bit in those areas. In AI, there were several data sets that actually became standards, and everyone was trying them, and that was a very good push for AI as well. From the viewpoint of the companies, of course, and now for that matter, it can be the pharmaceutical companies. Of course, they don't want to share any data because that's their know-how. This is the data that they actually come up with their new IP. And I think the academia is really the bridge between the national need and the company's need, so that if academia is being pushed by the government to provide data, to provide public domain data, to collect public domain data and to publish on it, that can be extremely helpful for everyone in this field.
In terms of collaboration with the academia, I wanted to continue what Eden said about the fact that sharing like a patent or a theoretical paper is very hard to be effective. It has to be something very special to make it all the way to, you know, you pay over the paper itself. I think that to make it practical, there is a challenge here to do kind of a POC and to try it somehow. And because it's academia, there are assets here. There are students who do projects, and they could do internships, and we could actually leverage the system of academia and all the distance between the researcher, the paper he wrote, and the industry to do something that will benefit the whole chain in making these things more practical and approachable. And I know that we, for example, have like 70 interns every summer. Not all of them are students. They are all kind of sources. But at the end, I think that making some of the research more practical, especially those that are candidate for selling, will give it an extra price in a sense.
Absolutely. I think that what you heard now is exactly what we are looking here and trying to really push in Israel in general between the academia and the industry. Much more cooperation, that more students and professors will cooperate closely with industry and governments institute to share information, research, and become much more attractive. And Eden, what you said related to IPs, there is known the big gap or the value of that between the academia and taking this forward. And this is something that we really encourage you. Please come to the different universities. In Tel Aviv, we call it Ramot. In the Weizmann Institute, it's called Yeda. Every university has its own name, but they are responsible for the IP and the new innovation things happen in the different research institute. Come to them, check what they have. If there is a value for you, take it forward. This is how we will really take forward the AI innovation into the industry. And this really takes us to the next question to the panelists. And this, I will start with you, Eden, again, related to the latest video that Google released about AI. So I will ask you very kindly, Eden, that you will share, first of all, if people didn't saw this marvelous, maybe this is not the right term here, but if you are not familiar with this very known video of Google, and what do you think this is going forward from here? And then everybody, of course, also.
Trying to be your YouTube, I guess. So it's an assistant. Yeah, think of an assistant. It's a great demo of a computer. Initially, you don't fully understand. It's actually a computer that is setting an appointment and having a fairly wide range of possibilities, which is something you wouldn't expect AI. So there are two innovations there. The first one that you see is it actually sounds like a human, but not only just sounding like a human. It's like, how about like, so using kind of gestures and using semantics that represent humanity versus computers, and that is striking, but is actually not the biggest innovation. You actually see interesting research like Facebook Israel that does look-alike and sound-alike on sound samples. Some pretty interesting research, but that's today. The really interesting thing is context, right? It actually handled the other side extremely well. It's like, oh, so you don't have an appointment 10 a.m., and also what kind of service are you looking for? Are you looking for a service specific? I'm terrible with spa, but assume spa services or beauty services. So the interesting thing there, and the reason why it's interesting, is the value is very clear, right? Every one of us wants an assistant, and none of us wants to do scheduling. But the interesting thing is that, what about information collection? Once you have AI that can actually converse with someone else, think about calling more than 1,000 locations and extracting what kind of appointments they have, where are their availabilities, who is the competition, what is their pricing. Suddenly, when it's not humans and you can actually unleash computers to talk with humans in an open manner, because you have an AI backend, then suddenly you can do some pretty interesting stuff. One of the central banks in Israel is not allowed to publish or advertise on a one-to-one basis for a certain service. Let's not go into who that is, but they're not allowed to do that. So one brilliant thing they did is they said, oh, we're not publishing, we'll survey people. How about, when doing a survey, we actually need to tell them what the service is in order to understand whether it's useful to them, right? Which is advertising if they call 1 million people and tell them about the service and then ask what do they think about the service. So think of what that means, the Google demo, but now it means that you can impersonate people throughout and basically do anywhere from a DDoS attack, you want to do fake appointments, to information collection and information gathering. That's kind of the black side, the flip side of the same value proposition in AI.
Other panelists about? Yes, Dorit, please.
It's similar to a whole space of large-scale social schemes. So this is done commercially, but also done by political entities and governments. That somebody who wants to lobby something will do, like, leverage a service or do themselves, invent players in social networking, invent Twitters, invent Facebook users, invent. These are people that would seem to you real, with real background. They will have discussion, debate, dispute, blogs about the topic, and they will influence your mind in a way that you will not necessarily realize with simple eyes that this is actually social play. And then there are governments that are using social plays to also create. So think about somebody in the Arab world trying to influence social opinions in Israel by creating players in both ends and making disputes to increase the argument against something. And you'll read this and it would seem real for you, and it's not real. So these things exist, and you should know that when you see a Twitter, it's not necessarily a real Twitter, or when you see a blog, it's not necessarily written by the same credentials as they seem on the blog. And this is not just by AI. This could be done by human, but AI intensify this. You could do it in higher quantity. So at the end, because we will not have patience to read all this junk given to us by AI, we will create AI that will read all this junk, decide which is AI, and will give us only the things that are not AI. So that's the only real solution to such things, is that those that are calling you, I will stop answering my phone because all those people will call me, and at some point I'll either have an answering machine that will be an AI and will screen which one is AI on the other side, or I'll just, disconnect and not answer my phone anymore.
Yeah, I wish we can have that now. In the U.S., I'm sure here it happens in Israel too, which is we get a lot of robocalls on our cell phones. They look, the first 6 digits look just like people that you know. And so you tend to pick them up. So it'd be really good to have a way to kind of discriminate which calls are real, which calls aren't.
Interesting thing, by the way, is just people assume that speech is more trustworthy than text right now. I think that's the key thing to take away. It's because people don't understand the advances that speech has gone through. So that's interesting, is what subjectively do we believe is real and what is not.
That AI becoming a very common product. Everyone can do immediately a system. It's a Lego type. There is many tools in the internet. The company has developed a lot of tools. Google putting in infinite amount of tools. So I don't think, and it will be so easy to do an AI systems. I don't think any regulation can be applied to that. It's too common and too big to do some regulation.
There's actually an interesting point here. So at the beginning of the internet era, people were predicting that humans will become isolated, each one stuck on his phone or on his computer screen, and will not be communicating with each other. Clearly the opposite happened. Actually the internet increased dramatically the amount of communication between people. People now expose everything in their life in every possible way. And it's possible that there's going to be a cycle where, kind of like what was suggested here, that AI machines will be talking to AI machines, and the humans will become somewhat isolated again. That would be kind of an interesting thing to see in the future, how it's going to go. Difficult to predict.
Thank you. We talked about defense, and we just mentioned how statistical algorithm or AI or machine learning algorithm, it doesn't matter if it's decision making or if it's clustering, deep learning, etc. For defense purposes, we did not even start learning what will be utilized for the attackers. We are going to see, does the next challenge going to be an attacker based on decision model, decision tree model? Is it going to be a combination of multiple attacks that combine a machine learning algorithm behind it? If so, the entire perspective of how we are doing the defense is going to be changed. And it is an emerging threat or emerging challenge that we need to learn and need to understand what we could learn from that. And the best way to do that, in my perspective, of course, is my colleagues to the right.
This will take us to the next step. The next question will be, for the panelists, is you're coming from different areas. Where do you think, what will be the next big AI news or breakthrough in the industry, VCs, academia, in the next year? Assuming that we will meet here, of course, I'm sure we will meet here again next year, I would like to see where are we going? What is the next 12 months really major thing that we can put and say, yes, we first identify this here at the Tel Aviv University conference? Sunil, we will start with you.
It's like looking into the crystal ball, right?
Absolutely.
To say what's going to come. It's 12 months is a very short period of time to innovate something. You've heard from other academics here and entrepreneurs where it takes a long time, sometime a decade plus, to really come up with something that's kind of the secret sauce. What we're seeing, at least, algorithms and deep learning and machine learning is being applied across all aspects of enterprise software as well as consumer, but certainly on the enterprise side. One of the things that's difficult from a venture perspective is kind of differentiating one company versus another. And I say that because they all have great backgrounds. You know, obviously here, most of the folks are out of 8200. They're all technically skilled. You know, our job, what's difficult for us is we're not looking just at technology, we're looking at businesses. Where can we build a business around the technology and a value proposition for customers? And what we're seeing that where AI is really being applied is automation is a big deal in cyber. It's also been applied for performance related. One of the challenges that the AI and security is creating is there impact to the performance and efficiency, or is it enhancing the performance and efficiency? And that's something that I think what you'll see in the next 12 months is these algorithms will get better, not just in cyber, but also on the business side. And you'll start seeing, and as consumers will start seeing from companies, whether it's Facebook or Google and other startups, start seeing services that are more catered to us. And that's the real advances using machine learning and deep learning. It's not having to think about what we want or what we need, but it being fed to us automatically.
I think there are two types of activities. One are fundamental research, you know, and results in this space, and one are outcomes that are not necessarily, you know, less innovative, but are not like breakthrough in algorithm or anything. So if you take iPhone, when it came out, there was nothing new practically, because Nokia was trying to do surfing in the internet before as well, and it was connected, etc. But the combination of touch screen with the ease of use, with the all the effect around it, made it to be something new and exciting. So not always a breakthrough is like a fundamental research. Now, I think that fundamental research changes take much long time. So everything we'll see in the next 12 months are things that we already seen. This is also true, by the way, in security. Most of the attacks that are new are things that some people did at some capacity years back. There are very few things that are surprisingly new. The Spectra and Meltdown kind of vulnerabilities were like surprisingly new. It was a kind of a new vector. But even that, side channel attacks were known research space much before that. So everything I'd say is new is something that has the roots now and is not absolutely new. So what will be exciting are new usages always. It will be taking something fundamental and applying it in another space. I think one of the spaces that is arising as a challenge in security is IoT, because it has many problems in there. And I think one of the places where AI would be used is to secure IoTs. But that's by itself, it's very boring because there is nothing new to it. What will be interesting is it will be like a cool implementation. So at the end, I think everything we'll say that will happen in the next 12 months is something that is already in happening.
I think it said prediction is hard, especially when it's about the future. So anyway, yes. So I think AI implementations are actually divided to two. The first one is looking at humans as a margin problem. So when humans are just too expensive or too scarce, then AI can actually step in. If I look totally unrelated to cyber, a company like JoyTunes that teaches music education, and it's just impossible sometimes to get a teacher, and many times it's not worthwhile to pay $100, especially when you're tone deaf like me. But actually using a computer and AI in order to do note extraction makes sense. So I don't pay $100 a lesson, I pay $100 a year, and it makes sense. The other kind is not when humans are the margin problem, but you actually need scalability. So you just have too much data or too many customers or too many situations. And there you apply AI in order to scale it up or to reduce the latency. So companies like Anodot that do pattern matching in order to find anomaly detection, that makes sense to apply AI because you have all that data and you want to provide fast services. Or companies like in the cyber area, a company like Panarrays that actually wants to do vendor assessment, and it's just impractical to do it in larger scales. So that's where you'll see AI applied kind of in these two categories.
So I think that what is needed is that extend AI into materials that are not speech and images. Speech and images has been proven, and all the time there is a lot of papers and companies that doing AI on images and speech, but on using big data, as I use big data analytics, and where the data is structured or unstructured, and then there is there's no infrastructure to do that with AI. So this is one thing. Second thing, that there is no substance to what the people do. It's, as I said before, it's a Lego, it's a tools that people assemble. They build another network, this network, another network, they get the results and they go home. But missing substance for the theory. And once there is a substance to the theory, I think it will generate many, many interesting algorithms.
I'll continue Eden's point and say that in the past we used AI for kind of issues, for example, recommend music or some things that could help us in our time, passing time, but not something that's extremely substantial. In recent years, we are seeing the direction of AI. Actually, we are putting our lives in the hands of AI, and driverless cars are a very good example of that. And I believe that this trend is going to become stronger and stronger. So as we kind of trust AI more and more, we will see more and more applications where we are really willing to risk our lives and trust AI. And just as Eden mentioned, kind of marginalize the humans, we definitely are going to do that in the cars. I believe we're going to do that in many, many other aspects. One of them is medicine, for example, and others, of course, in cyber.
As you mentioned, IoT is one of the next challenges, but we can see starting today or within the past few months, more and more global initiatives, starting with the Horizon 2020 or from Europol, from European Union, you can see it in the States. We see many global initiatives. You mentioned about the FS ISAC, the financial ISAC. You can see it in each and every ISAC or each and every sector. It doesn't matter if it's aviation, if it's energy, if it's water, if it's transportation, health, of course. You can see that the data is going from the companies, going up to the sectors, and starting collaboration with one another. You can see more and more organizations that try to build. And the trust is the major problem there. If I could send information anonymously, then we could start building the trust. We built a system in Israel called CyberNet. We already have more than 500 organizations in there, and we are expecting by the end of the year to add another approximately 700 more. The major challenge was how to build the trust between the companies that they will share the information between one another. They could do it anonymously. They could decide what to do with the data. But the most important thing is how we are changing from organizational base to a sectorial base to a global base, meaning follow the same, and how we could doing massive structured and non-structured data to compose new solutions.
Very interesting, and I think you pass a very tough question predicting the future, and I must say, very nice answers, honestly. And now it's your turn. We will ask you to ask the panelists questions. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand, and yes, please. I'll give you a mic.
So I know we have a section this afternoon on ethics, but one area that, as I hear you talking, one area that raises concern for society and regulators is the ethics of the artificial intelligence and the guidance for using artificial intelligence for the goodness of humanity. One of you or some of you speak about that.
Thank you very much, panelists.
I'm happy to start. So that's actually a very good question, and I think it's a beautiful example where technology actually goes much, much faster than the regulatory aspects. And so we are just now starting to discover all the potential problems that this beautiful new technology has created, and I think regulation will kind of follow through. And when it comes, you know, of course, people who got used to no regulation at the beginning of this era of technology will say, no, it's too much regulation, etc. But clearly that will be needed to defend us. So I suspect that there's going to be a huge wave of regulatory issues that will actually try to protect us. Of course, technology goes very, very fast. So by the time this regulation is kind of like building the roads, you know, we are building them to the needs of 10 years ago. So by the time, of course, the regulation will show up, technology will be somewhere else, but, you know, that's how life is.
So I apologize for being a pessimist here. I was invited to a session at Oxford, a think tank, for a couple of days by the Center for Existential Threat, which I think implies what the position of the center was. And we discussed an NPT-like framework, like the Non-Proliferation Treaty framework. And I think the bottom line is that there aren't enough choke points in AI. So if you look at protecting the data or tainting the data, impossible. Data is freely available, and even if you taint it, you know what the source was. You can't do much more. Models, again, bits cannot be controlled fully. Talent was the closest, and there have been operations of trying to follow AI talent and understand what you do with them and who do they work for. And the fourth is compute, which was the most promising. But then the problem is that China is actually taping out the first AI chips well before the West. So would you place AI limitations, like introspection limitations, which AI needs introspection in order to continuously learn? Yes, you could in the West, and then chips would be fabbed in the East without those limitations. So the pessimist view is that, yes, there are ethic aspect to it, but it's most likely that the bad actors will ignore them and the good actors will limit themselves, and that would actually put them at a disadvantage versus the bad actors.
Yeah, I think that people understand what is AI and ask ethics questions. What about, did you ask them about physics, chemistry, material sciences, biology? They all can generate a lot of things that can destroy the world, can destroy the people, and so on. So there people didn't ask about ethics. So in AI, people is more fancy to ask about ethics, but it's go for the all categories of all sciences that can really generate bad things.
First, I wanted to recommend a book called Life 3.0 that deals with generic AI. And the question is, will it be computable into the AI, the ethics rule that the AI will have to follow? And is it good if the AI will be limited to certain things? And it shows some extreme cases where if you set a very strict rules of ethics on an AI entity, then it sometimes acts on the opposite way that you actually intended it to act by learning from it and kind of doing something. So it's a bit long discussion, but it's a nice book to read, and it deals with the imposing of ethics on the AI itself. But AI is a fundamental technology. I don't think we are going to limit fundamental technology. There was a time that people tried to limit the usage of supercomputers in the world, and I don't think we are going in this direction. So the fundamental technology will not be limited. Where regulation may apply is in an industry. Who could be a doctor? What would be the rules of an AI that is doctor that is acceptable in a sense? Who could drive your car? What would be the rules on AI developed to drive cars? So the rules and regulation and ethics, I think, can only be imposed on the usage, on the vertical, and not on the fundamental technology. I don't think it will come in the compute. Also heard an idea at some point to limit hackers that grew in certain units in the army in what they could do for profession. And it's also not going to work, because this is what people learn to do, and that's what they are excellent at. And if somebody will limit them, they will go do it somewhere else, because that's what they do in life. So I don't believe in limiting the fundamentals. So you could only limit the use cases.
Thank you very much. Another question from the audience. You wanted? Later you.
It's about disruption in AI. So if we consider the generic architecture for intelligent agents, this plan, sense, plan, act cycle. So in which fields do you see we have in the next years the most disruptive elements to expect? It's more in the sensing, it's more in planning, in real intelligence and planning algorithms, or then in the actuation part?
It's a complicated question from my perspective. The way we're looking at it, panelists mentioned here that the horizontal AI is pretty much out there. From a vertical perspective, I think there's some real opportunities, especially in healthcare. We heard earlier today, and I think that's, Jacob, to your point earlier, the next 12 months you will see some vertical industries will really leverage AI beyond the horizontal platform.
I'll just go with my intuition. I wanted to say that I think sensing is the most mature, but also is the one that would still get many changes. I think that acting is something that many people are investing on. I think planning is the further along. That's my intuition on the thing. Maybe it's a place to innovate and put more AI into planning, but I'd still invest more in sensing and acting if I was to invest today. That's a very generic. I was trying to understand what will my intuition said. So
I'll take
quick answer. I think you're referring to the OODA loop, right? Of how the mostly robots, for example, actually observe, plan, act. We've invested into a robotics company called Common Sense Robotics. From what we see is that these kind of layers are actually being removed and integrated into a single neural network instead of looking at this as different stages like historically that's been the case, and that a single network actually works better than trying to separate those different stages. So, but that's from a very limited perspective what's happening in robotics in OODA loop related.
I'll take that into human issues. So in sensing humans, sensing physiological parameters of humans, I think we are beginning to scratch a new era of miniature, minimal sensors that can be 24/7 with us. And I think with that and with the cyber issues, we'll start hacking humans. There are many examples of that, and actually a year ago we presented this. One can change heart rate, one can change a lot of things, and actually cyber will have to go into miniature devices that will protect our pacemaker and will protect our insulin pump and whatnot, because it could be kind of so much easier to hack humans and to actually injure them. So I think we are starting a new era of cyber/medicine/physiological sensors that will be of great interest.
Okay, thank you. And now we have time for the last question. So we'd like to ask the last question. No, we want to give others also the possibility. So you want to ask a question?
Hi, Stuart Rogers from VentureBeat. Great panel, thank you very much. Thank you for being pessimist, by the way. So, talking about pessimism with AI, everybody always says, is it going to augment us? Is it going to replace us? I personally believe you just follow the money. People have augmented or replaced using technology forever, depending on whether they're autocratic managers or not. Bringing it back to slightly more positive, and since we're talking about disruption, what are some of the best examples you've seen of AI being used for positive projects and social good?
I I can say something very positive. I think we are all, humanity is getting older, life expectancy is going higher. I believe that AI has a huge role in helping those elderly humans. One, through speech and through natural language understanding and processing. There will be, that will increase the social aspect of those people, increase the ability of these people to remember, like help them remember, etc. And actually increase also the monitoring, the medical monitoring of these people, help them stay at home for longer. Of course, this will be used by hackers to actually get money out of these people and to actually brainwash them at the same time. So of course there's a lot of cyber aspects of this as well, but I believe that this is one positive thing that we can look into AI.
Well, I'm a pessimist by nature, so it's a hard question for me. But I think that we are becoming a community. We are becoming, we're already talking about what we could do by nature to the community. And we can see that the data is there. And since we are becoming more and more technological oriented, if I could call it that way, we will need to provide in a very fast manner the backbone or the services or the platform or the structure for sharing data. It doesn't matter how we are going to do that. It doesn't matter when we are going to do that. We will need to go further to the next step that required us by nature to share more and more information, so we will become a better community.
Quick fix of, so obviously I'm a pessimist about control of AI. I'm a venture capitalist, so if I'm not a optimist, I'd absolutely be out of a job. So just as clarification, but the short answer is, if you assume productivity actually trickles down to wealth, and if you disbelieve governments in saying that there's a trickle down of lower taxes to other people, but productivity is actually distributing more wealth to people, so AI can actually be the biggest driver ever of generating wealth that can then be redistributed, if it's through universal income, basic income, or through actual wealth generated from blockchain projects or otherwise. So AI can actually generate huge amounts of wealth through increased productivity. That, if I look on the positive aspect, it just won't be controllable.
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, it actually makes our life better, right? I mean, we're in 2018. I think 10 years from now, 2030, 12 years, life's going to be a lot better for most people on the planet than it is today.
I wanted to put education as one, that through AI we could build better education systems that would be more flexible to many ages and many diversities and challenges in education. So we could make education much more available to much bigger audience. It could be kids that could start learning in earlier stage if they are interested, or it could be people that education was far from them because they didn't reach it at the right age and it will be accessible for them, or people with challenges that through AI could be, it would be more possible to teach them than in other ways.
Education.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to say thank you very, very much to our panelists, to Dorit, to Sunil, to Amir, to Eli, to Nathan, and to, of course, to Eden. And first, thank you very much for them.